think at one point my parents were just like, we just want you to be happy. And if you don't want to get married, that's fine. And he's a great guy. Don't let him go. And I'm just like, okay, like if that's your worry, he's not going anywhere. So.
There's this thing where I go to Rashi and I tell her I'm really proud of you. And she backs away from me. And she knows I'm saying that because I'm going to take my cold hands and put it on her back and pat her back and be like, I'm very proud of you.
Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
And welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean. And this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook and Instagram at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 20 years.
Every day we get to hear intimate details about a couple's celebrations, disappointments, and everyday challenges. We've often wished these stories were shared because we know we are more similar than different. So we've created not only an avenue where you can hear about people's intimate lives, but an atmosphere where people come over to our home pub, pour a drink, and share their stories.
People like today's guests, Ansh and Rashi, thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's a pleasure. We love listening to your podcast, and I especially listen to quite often. So it's an honor to be here.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for that. And we were honored to be on your podcast as well. It was really an awesome discussion. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So, for our audio listeners, why don't you give us a little bit about, a little information about yourselves. How old are you? What do you guys do for a living? And how long have you been together?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Rashi here. I'm 30 years old, and Ansh and I have known each other for quite a while now. I think if you had to put a number on it, probably 4 years. I work in the tech industry, and our relationship has had many beautiful flourishes and twists and turns along the way. So we're very excited to share that story with you.
And this is Ansh here. I work in the tech industry as well as a software engineer. And on the side, I have like multiple different projects. And we've been together in this journey, a fun journey for a few years. And, just it's exciting to see what lies ahead for us. So
that's awesome.
Can you tell us the story of how you met?
Oh my gosh, that's going to take me back indeed. So I think that this story starts with a bunny hop, which is the way Ansh likes to tell it. I think about 3 years ago, we were going to a networking event at Harvard, which is where we both did our master's from and where we actually met. And I remember it was a huge crowded room filled with a lot of people, and being new to the city of Boston, I really wanted to just make some friends. And so I was doing the whole social butterfly thing, just going around saying hi, chit-chatting with people. And I remember Ansh likes to say, I jumped into the conversation that he was a part of. And
so it was a few of us just standing around in a circle and just exchanging notes about classes and talking about professors. And suddenly this girl jumps in and just starts looking at us and trying to join in on a conversation. I hadn't seen that before, the confidence that she brought in. And she came with this curiosity, like, what are you guys talking about? I want to join in. And it was just so beautiful. And that's how I remembered her, not necessarily her face. Because when we went back home, we'd exchanged numbers. I got a text from her, and I couldn't really put a face to the number and the name, but I remembered that hop. So that's how that's the story of how we met.
Yeah. And I think since then, that was just like the inception points, but our relationship really flourished over many different types of dates. Everything from study dates to going and exploring our firsts and getting a chance to really uncover all of the layers that makes us us. But from the very start, we knew it was going to be something special.
What did you think of Ansh when you first met him?
I think my first reaction was, I wonder if he's gonna give me his number because I could really use some friends right now. And he looks like he looks like a decent guy to be friends with. And that's funny because I mean, I wasn't expecting anything more out of it, but I think the first time I really saw him, like really kind of like peeled back the layers and got to know him, was our very first friendship date. Because it's like we weren't really dating. I was just like, hey, I'm looking for a friend. And we went to a karaoke bar. And I
Oh.
remember we were sitting and we were having a conversation and we were just bouncing ideas and talking about a variety of concepts, everything from traveling to what do you aspire to do to where were you raised. And at one point, like I think around 10 o'clock, we'd already been talking for 2 hours. The karaoke like started, right? So people are now like blaring and they're singing. And I remember I switched to sitting right next to him because I'm like, I still want to talk to you. Like we're not gonna let this distraction get in the way of you and I having this conversation right
Yeah.
now. And that was it. So after I really had a chance to talk to him, I just knew that it felt almost instantaneously that his soul was very familiar to mine. And I could tell that we were going to have a lot in common.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember going back home with a sore throat because even after sitting close to each other, we still had to scream to talk. And we talked a lot. We talked about the space, our dreams, the universe, just anything that came on the table, we took it as an offer and just had a conversation about it. And that night, when I was driving back home, I was like, I had a really good time. I want to, be with this person more. So slowly and surely, I started looking for ways on how I can hang out with her more and more often. That's when I suggested, let's do study dates. Exams are coming up. Let's go to the library together. We can study over there, play pool and breaks, go for food or something, and just anything and everything. I was looking for an excuse to spend more time with her, get to know her better.
It worked.
What did you guys learn growing up about relationships, and is your relationship similar or different than your parents and what you learned?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I definitely grew up in a home where my mom saw my dad as somebody that she would always put first. She's like, regardless of what happens behind closed doors, like your dad, I'm always there for your dad. And she's like, she's like, as children, she wanted us to very much understand the concept. She's like, adults can have disagreements, but that doesn't mean that they're not aligned and that they're not strong in their relationship and that they don't love each other. You can have disagreements and they can be healthy for your relationship. So I always grew up with this idea that I wanted to find someone in life that I was going to be able to build a very strong partnership with, someone who would help me not only encourage me to continue fueling my own self-awareness journey, but also yes, and all of the crazy ideas and projects that I wanted to work on every time I came up with an idea, rather than doubt it or wonder if it was going to amount to anything like that. So in a way, I think that my relationship very much echoes the best parts of my parents' relationships, and I think we are very intentional in working on what we saw as like the room for improvement from my parents' relationship.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference that I see in our relationship compared to our parents is like both our moms are homemakers. They've taken care of the house, they've taught the kids, and dads were like the primary workers. So there's that shared responsibility which gets split up. Like dad's responsible for X, Y, and Z, and mom's responsible for the other stuff. And they're working well together. It's a system they've crafted that over years. They've perfected the whole flow, and there's good communication and there's healthy love in the family that is being shared to the kids. So that was beautiful. But in our relationship, it wasn't like that. We
Mhm.
sort of have to do everything and nothing at the same time, right? We both are cooking in rotations. We both are doing our 9 to 5 jobs, and even after that on self projects, and we're both socializing and going out equally, if not one more than the other. We both have our own ambitions that we want to work towards. So I think the biggest discovery for us has been, how do we work towards these goals
Mhm.
that we want to individually meet for ourselves and also as a couple, as partners, what are our goals and how do we get there? What do we do to get there?
Mhm.
What cultural differences or similarities have kind of carried over from your parents' relationship into your relationship together?
Mhm. I think for me, the biggest cultural similarity that I see is this willingness to stick through it, and to not just assume the worst about each other when things get rough. I think I think when my parents did that, it came from this sense of like, okay, we have kids, we have to find a way to make it work. I think when Ansh and I decide that we're going to find the best in each other before getting worried that this is something big that we're never going to be able to pass, we do it from a space of really wanting to be each other's strength, as well as leveraging each other's foundations to keep propelling our own dreams forward. So we seek that same kind of strength and foundation that I've seen in my parents, but as a place of proactivity. It's not something that, it's not a byproduct of being married. It's an intentional creation that we work on every single day because we see the value in that. We see the value in actually stepping up and being there for each other and getting to know each other that intimately.
Yeah, I agree. I think patience is something which has come to us
Mm.
in the most of beautiful ways. Like, we know that we have arguments and we appreciate those arguments because we know those arguments help us get to a better space, helps us understand each other better. And that has come from our parents' willingness to stick together. We've seen them struggle, we've seen them in arguments, and we've seen how they've gone after those disagreements and arguments to a better space and still be able to build that healthy, happy household. I think that's something that we appreciate seeing from our parents and we try and practice as well.
Mhm.
When did you know that this was your person?
Oh man, it's hard to find a distinct moment.
I think for me, it's every single day. I I have this thing where I tell Rashi, I won't promise you happily ever after. I won't promise you that I love you forever, but I do know I love you today. And I know you're my person today because you take care of me, because you got me coffee in the morning, you got me salad when I was working and I couldn't get up from my meeting today. It's like these small moments every day, which makes me believe that I can count on you, on not just helping me out with these random things, but also I can count on you when I'm down and upset, when I'm something's bothering me, I can go and talk to you,
Mm.
and I can count on you for helping me achieve my dreams, my personal ambitions. And honestly, that's how I know she's my person.
No. And the funny thing is, initially, before I think I got to know Ansh really well, when he would say that, it used to kind of hurt. Like, oh, you can't promise me happily ever after. Does that mean we're not gonna, this is not gonna last forever? And what I've actually come to realize is that no one can ever guarantee happily ever after. All they can guarantee you is a willingness to stay in the relationship and work on it every second of every day. And in return, if the byproduct of that is a happily ever after, great. If the byproduct of that is having a much more difficult conversation where maybe it's time for us to grow separately, then that's fine too. And once I understood that, it didn't hurt as much because I understood he is actually giving me the most important thing someone can give another, which is willingness and his time. And for me, there was a single clear moment when I knew he was my person, and that was when about a year and a half of dating / being friends, we had moved in together maybe 3 or 4 months before, and we were just in this constant cycle of I was feeling strong emotions, and my reaction to that was to shut down and be like, I need time to process, leave me alone. And Ansh's request in those moments would always be, okay, fine, you can have your time, but I just need to know what's going on. Can you please just tell me what's going on? Like, he needed some form of communication. And to be fair, you're living in the same household, energy seeps. He's feeding off of my energy. And I used to tell him, if I could tell you what's wrong, it wouldn't be a problem and we wouldn't be here. And so I can't tell you what's wrong.
It's funny because initially my first response was, tell me the problem, I'll fix it.
Yeah.
I'll find a solution, I'll fix it. Don't worry, I know all the solution, I know I can fix it. And my solutions would be very obvious, that are not very obvious. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And it was not working. In fact, it was so not working that there were multiple times where I thought maybe this relationship isn't for me. He's just not going to understand how to give me space. And so after I think 4 months of this cycle repeating where I would need time to process my emotions, I felt like Ansh didn't understand me. One day he did present a solution. And his solution was what we call our emotional status dashboard. It's a dashboard that we use for nonverbal communication, in which the person that's feeling emotions is able to write down, like, I feel anger, it's like passing through me right now. And that acts as a status symbol for the other person to know, hey, there's something going on internally that this person is trying to resolve. And it doesn't have anything to do with me necessarily, or maybe it does, but I don't need to take responsibility for it or necessarily be affected to it as much as if I didn't know. And that's when I knew Ansh was a person for me, because he presented a solution that we could work with. He brought creativity to a challenge that we were facing and decided to lean into what I was telling him, that I can't use my voice right now, but I want to communicate with you. And his answer to that was, let's get creative and solve this in a way that makes both of us happy. And now we're on like version 7 of our emotional status dashboard, but it's definitely a tool that we use often, especially when difficult emotions arise and we really don't know how to work through them instantaneously. We need a little bit of time to process them.
So you took like a tech software engineering approach to it.
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
absolutely. I love solving problems. That's something I do every day. So I was like, I want to solve a problem, but the mistake I was doing before was I wasn't listening to her, to my customer, to my user. I thought I knew what the problem was, but at some point I realized she herself is trying to figure that out.
Mhm.
She can't communicate that to me until she knows herself. So in the dashboard, we have this section called baking and baked. Baking is when she's identified there's an emotion going on, anger or happy. And sometimes I use it for like sorrow or if I'm feeling lonely, and I put it up. I'm like, I'm still processing it. And there's a section where you can be like, okay, I want to have a discussion or not. The goal with this whole framework and a lot of our different frameworks that we have is, how do we communicate to our partner without actually talking to them?
Mhm.
Nonverbal communication. Because the moment voice comes into the picture, words come into the picture, the way the other person listens, you can't really control that.
Mhm.
So we've sort of had this framework to agree on some rules that, okay, an emotion's coming up, until it goes to like a baked section, don't bother me about it.
Mhm.
Help me out, remove some of my burden if you can by doing the dishes or whatever tasks it may be, but leave me alone until then. And when I move the emotion to a baked, then I'm ready to have a conversation, and then we can brainstorm on what needs to be done.
I think it solved at least like 4 out of 5 arguments that we have in the day, because it's normally just a inability to express the emotion and walk somebody through it in real time. But I know I want to get there. I want to circle back and be like, hey, you know what? Sorrow is like moving through me today, and I want to talk about it. And I'm finally ready to have that conversation.
How early in your relationship did you start to have, more in-depth conversations, especially about, things going on for each of you that came up because of the relationship?
You remember New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Quite early. I think maybe, well, from the very first day, we never shied away from difficult conversations. I think we were always very willing to dive into the deep end, simply because that's how we function. Like, we both believe that, the more you understand yourself and the more you're willing to share with your partner, the easier it becomes for somebody to get a much more well-rounded picture of you. And so we never shied away from a difficult conversation. We are very honest in being like, we're not ready to discuss all parts of it, especially like things around finance. Early on in our relationship, I wasn't very comfortable having some of those conversations. But I think about 5 months into being friends, we went to New Hampshire. And there was a whole situation with, we were supposed to be sleeping out in the snow. We had 2 flat tires. There was no hotel that we could check into. It was just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, a lot of cold and starvingness, and just being like, what are we going to do? And in the middle of all of that discomfort, I remember Ansh and we walked into a cafe at like 3 a.m. in the morning, because that was the only thing that was open. And over several cups of really hot coffee, I was just like, we really need to talk about what's going on here, because I'm wondering if I should keep you as a friend. Like, you planned this trip and I'm not feeling very safe right now. Can we discuss what went wrong, and maybe what can we do going forward so that I don't feel like this?
Yeah, I think that was one of the lowest point a couple or friends can hit. That whole day was such a disaster. And what worked for us was we worked as a team to face all the challenges that came on that day. Like, she was reading the manual, I was trying to change the tire in the middle of the road at 2 a.m. in New Hampshire, where it's like so cold in December. But we came out of it, and we came out of it stronger, knowing that this feeling of I can count on you.
Mm-hmm.
When we hit rock bottom, I know you'll be there to help me out.
Mm-hmm.
And I can leverage on your strengths, and I can add my strengths, and we can work together as a team to build that.
So at this point, this is 5 months into
A friendship.
knowing each other,
Mhm.
and you guys are just friends still at this time.
Yeah, there's like the briefest, like, oh, maybe this could be more. I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that Ansh was the kind of person who had values that very much resembled mine. And that whether we were friends or we were something more, I was going to learn a lot from this guy. And so for me, every opportunity was kind of like a litmus test of, okay, so if I was going to like live with you and we were going to make a life happen and we faced a bunch of adversity, how are you going to handle it? And again, I think this was another defining moment where even in my friendship, I knew he was the one for me, because while we were changing the tires at 2 a.m. in the morning and frozen, right? Frozen, he's still smiling. He's still laughing and having a good time. And I'm just like, how are you so happy right now? Like, this is the last emotion I'm feeling. And he's just like, well, we'll figure it out. It's going to be all right. And he was that was just his nature. In that one glimpse, I knew he was action and solution oriented, not problem oriented. And that was something that I very much admired about you.
Were you dating during the time that you guys were friends or deemed each other friends?
I did have a boyfriend back in California whom it was almost like an extended relationship, mostly because I didn't know how to say I can't be with you anymore while I was moving away to Boston. And I met Ansh pretty much like a month into living in Boston.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that like conflict of interest definitely was because I was in a happy relationship. But at the same time, I just knew who I was in that relationship wasn't going to enable me to fulfill my potential. So I had another decision to make on top of that, which is, do I end one relationship to say yes to another?
Yeah. And I didn't know about her relationship status really, because I hadn't really asked her about it. It wasn't something I was looking out of it that, we're going to date. I honestly, selfishly just wanted to spend more time and be like, I want to be friends with you. If that turns out to be something more, that's great. That's going to be awesome. But at the minimum, I want to be like best friends with you or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't dating anyone. I was in a relationship quite a while ago. I don't even remember, maybe a year ago or something. So yeah, I was just looking for friends at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So at what point did it transition from friends to being a couple?
Yeah. I feel like it was almost like a gradual waking up, where I saw all of the signs. And when I went home, I think a few months before our friendship turned into a romance, I guess you could say, I had decided that I was going to be ending my relationship with my then partner because it was not going to be what brought me fulfillment long-term in life. I could see that we didn't match in a lot of things in our value system specifically. And I think that organically, me meeting somebody like Ansh and learning that there is so much more in life than the experiences that I've had, and that there are people out there that will help me become a better version of myself. And I don't have to kind of just stay in the love that I know. I can take a chance if he accepts that love in return. That gave me a lot of courage that I needed to be able to do a lot of self-work and understanding, what do I want? What do I want in terms of love, in terms of happiness and fulfillment in my life. And so when I ended that relationship with my boyfriend, I told, at the same time, Ansh visited California at that time, and I told him my whole story. And I told him, I've always felt like you and I can be something more, but I am in no place to be in a relationship right now. And if you'll have me as a friend, I think I just need a friend right now. And if that's good enough for you, I want you to know that it's the most that I can give you right now. And that was a very difficult
Yeah.
and vulnerable conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always sort of resisted getting labels assigned.
Mm.
So having that conversation of, okay, you're my girlfriend and I'm your boyfriend, we, I think, didn't explicitly want to sign up for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I think at some point we'd even said, I especially had said, I love you. I love spending time with you. Now take it whatever way you wanna, but I just want, again, more excuses to spend time with you. And this conversation about, am I your boyfriend?
Mhm.
I don't really care as much.
Mhm.
I think it was when we were going to Chicago,
Mhm.
maybe sometime in April, a few months after that, was this whole conversation of making it explicit, which happened on the flight. Rashi had this small box, and in that there were um, how many? 23 rings?
Yeah.
I think there were like
Labels, yeah.
23 labels with small little rings made of jute, and all those cards in that had labels. You're my friend,
Mhm.
you're my partner, you're my best friend, you're my, at the end, after all these labels came, you're my boyfriend.
Mhm.
And that sort of, I guess, when it became obvious, okay, now we've accepted that
Yes.
label, we are more than just friends, we're saying that, let's be explicit or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was such a beautiful moment, because it's amazing. I didn't even know it was something I wanted,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's something that I had been resisting for so long. It's just a bunch of mixed feeling on
Yeah.
the flight.
On the flight, on the flight to meet his brother in Chicago.
And you guys talk about, it's interesting to see the different generations and how they navigate this stuff. And a lot of people in your group, they're not coupling,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not like making conscious choice decisions. Will you be my girlfriend? Will you marry me? Will you move in with, sort of like, well, it's just sort of happens, or,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you see this in your peer group
Mm-hmm.
of no labels and stuff. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I think the comment that Ansh made about even our relationship with labels kind of feeds into what I've seen with my friend group. A lot of people have become really comfortable with this idea of, I kind of want to see how things work out between us, instead of just saying, I'm ready to make you my wife, or just proposing to you, or just moving in. And I think that a lot of it, what I've noticed tends to work for people, is when they take that kind of non-label approach, but don't forget the intentionality that comes with it, right? So a lot of people, I think, use labels as a way to propel certain ways of showing up. Like, okay, now I'm going to take care of you, or now I'm going to make sure that you're a priority for me, and now I'm going to make sure, X, Y, and Z. It's kind of like, oh, the label has been added, so now I'm activated, and I'm going to show up as this committed person who's going to be with you in health and sickness. And I think that if you're going to walk away from using the labels as a way of understanding yourself and your partner, you have to remember to still invite that intentionality back into your relationship, however you want. The label doesn't have to be the only way. And I think that that's the example that we lived by, because my parents, his parents, people around us would sometimes put the label of boyfriend, girlfriend, or be like, when are y'all getting married? And we'd always tell them, we're like, you know what? If married means that you're working together every day, helping each other live out their dreams, then call us married. We're already married. But if married means something else for you, then let's talk about them. Tell me, what are your expectations around this word, and I'll tell you how I'm willing to show up to it. And I think I've seen in my personal friend group that a lot of my colleagues and a lot of my friends are willing to have those more difficult conversations, especially because you're seeing a lot of dual income career families now, where people need to have some sense of equality in terms of home ownership and the work that's going on in the home. But a lot of the times I also see people still relying on those labels to kind of help navigate how to show up in these spaces. And that's, I think, really where the work that we do with Lovita is to kind of help bridge that gap of how are you able to show up and build your relationships a little bit more intentionally without having to rely on, okay, things have always just been done this way, and that's what I should do.
Yeah. The way I see it is, at least for us, we want to be intentional whenever we do accept a label, or we're deciding to go to the next step, move in. We want to be intentional and know why we're doing it. So I'm your boyfriend, but sure, what does that mean? Like, does it mean we're explicit? Like, how do we define what a boyfriend is? How do we define what a partner is? How do we define what a husband or wife is? That's the key for us. And what I see in my friends is a lot of times people are afraid of failing, and they don't want this label because they're afraid it's not going to work out and it's going to hurt. And for me, i I've been in relationships before, and I've had breakups before, and those I call as failures, and those failures have taught me, have made me stronger to not fear failure, rather embrace the love and appreciate the love that you get from whatever time you are together with whoever you are. And people are afraid to do that. Everyone's a little more um selfish, if you may. Like, they care about themselves a little more. The universe revolves around you. I don't want to be hurt, but it's okay to be hurt. It's fine. Like, if you're not afraid to accept that label, if you're willing, if you open up your heart, there are things which are going to come in. A lot of it is going to be good. There might be some bad things which will come in as well, but most
It
of it.
sounds very much like you guys what are doing is separating commitment from the label, right? And that in generations ago, you could have the label, you could have the the legal married status, but not have that commitment within your relationship. And so it sounds very much like you guys focus more on the commitment, and what you guys are willing to expect out of each other, yourselves, and the relationship versus what a label deems necessary. Is that what I'm getting at?
Absolutely. I think the way I like to describe it is, why are you in this relationship is what anchors us, right? That commitment factor. How you show up to it, either the labels or the actions that you decide to do, those can change and vary as you learn and grow or add new labels into your own repertoire. But why you are here, what you want from this person that you're saying you want to spend your life with, build a home with, raise kids with, that work shouldn't start and stop because of a label in your life. It's a part of who you are and what you want to manifest and create with your time on this planet. And I think that that's something that we've always been very intentional to keep separate.
Yeah, that's true.
What are some of those intentional things that you guys have decided were priorities or values for your relationship?
It's funny. We have this whole value stones. It's a bunch of 20 or 30 stones that we have, and those are just short phrases and messages that we want to invite into our home. And we're very intentional about going through that list every year and changing those stones. And some of the things are like, I'll talk about the biggest one. I think the biggest one is small happinesses and small doses of love. Like, how can we love each other in not grand gestures? That's important too, but how do we love each other? How do we show up for each other in these small moments, in these small gestures? And it can be as much as like bringing coffee, giving a kiss, giving a hug, or just pampering the other person, giving a head massage or something. But we are intentional every day of doing at least one thing to show up for the other person.
Absolutely. And I think that value stone acts as the primary foundation on which all of our other intentionality kind of builds up on. things like fostering our own traditions in the space of, sometimes what society gives us. Like during Christmas, we have a very special tradition where we like to pay it forward. Which is like, pay for other people's meals forward when you're going out and you're eating. And that's something that we like to do in the month of December. And like this, every time we come upon something that kind of has a story behind it, we like to ask ourselves, like Ansh said, what do we want to invite with this particular practice? And when intentionality kind of, it becomes embedded as every part of who we are and how we wake up and we spend every single day, it becomes a lot easier to give people the benefit of doubt, and not just like my partner, but friends that I've had some difficult relationships with, or other people that I meet, like my colleagues. I've realized that the way that we choose to live, the way we're inviting intentionality with these value stones in our own life, has this outward seeping effect where there is just more love and compassion and kindness that I have to extend to everyone else around me, the wider humanity. And so I've literally been able to see the firsthand effect of living a life filled with intentionality, and it's made me very happy. These last 4 years building a life with Ansh has been some of the most beautiful years that I've had the chance to be able to see myself grow and see my love grow.
Right. We do have traditions. So we're not very religious, but we want to participate in traditions. So what we end up doing is we spin off existing traditions and make our own. Like for example, the Christmas, we don't really get a Christmas tree because I don't believe in cutting a tree and getting it to your home. It's okay if others do it. What we end up doing is we put lights on the wall in the shape of a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sort of celebrating on our own way. In Holi, instead of putting colors on each other, we try and do nail paint of different colors on our nails.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of these traditions where we're being intentional on participating and celebrating, trying to find excuses to celebrate and do something to make these memories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how our love grows.
Were you both raised in a specific religion? And then also, how have you responded to the family expectations of, of when are you guys going to get married and the labels and all that? What's transpired, in response to those?
Oh, that's a lovely loaded question.
So we are married right now, and that was a big conversation that we had at some point. We weren't really looking to get married. I think at some point I wanted to get married, and Rashi asked me the simple question as to why, and I was like lost. I'm like, what do you mean why? That's what you do, right? And she's like, think about it, tell me why.
Mhm.
And it took me a while to figure out that why. It took me, I went to my parents, I went to my aunts and uncles and my friends, and I asked them, why did you get married? And nobody really had a very strong answer that was okay for me. A lot of it was just, well, that's what you do. You love somebody, and this is the way your love grows. Trust me. I'm like, I don't trust you. I mean, how is this one day gonna magically change things? My mom, especially, she kept insisting that, your love will go stronger. You'll have this bond that you don't understand right now, but you will after. And I didn't believe her. At some point, my why, when I went back to Rashi after many, many months, was just because I want to.
Mhm.
I don't have a reason, but it's something that I think will bring us joy. It's sort of another excuse to celebrate.
Mhm.
And that was it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because, like he said, we were both very happy just being in a domestic partnership. There was, I think, family expectation. They kept asking us. They're like, "Oh, okay, like take your time, but you are going to get married someday, right? Like that's going to happen, right?" And I was just like, I would challenge my mom, especially. I'd be like, why? Like, I need to understand. Just like Ansh was doing field research on his end, I was digging deeper into my parents' side and being like, what do you think is miraculously going to happen? And do you think that I'm not already doing that now? Do you feel like I'm not, do you feel like I'm going to be running away if I don't sign on the dotted line, to which I can tell you there's no dotted line out there that can keep me in this relationship if I don't want to be here. And so it's after many, many layers of pulling back. I think at one point my parents were just like, we just want you to be happy. And if you don't want to get married, that's fine. Just be happy. And he's a great guy. Don't let him go. Maybe he'll run away if you don't marry him. And I'm just like, okay, like if that's your worry, he's not going anywhere. So.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest insecurities my mom had too. Like,
Yeah.
she's gonna go away.
Mhm.
I was like, how is marriage gonna change that?
Yeah.
Right? It's not like I'm gonna put her in shackles after that. She can still go away. So isn't it better that she goes away now before we have to do these paperwork and traditions or whatever it will be?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, it won't happen. Once you sign it, once you do that, you cross that line, it doesn't happen.
So
Not without a lot of money.
it would
Not
cost
a lot of attorneys.
It would, and it would just make it more complicated. And so as we were having these conversations, we were realizing that our parents just had a very different narrative of what happens after marriage versus before marriage. And it's because they lived in a time frame where that's how it was for them. It wasn't necessarily true for us, but they were operating under very different circumstances, expectations, and beliefs, I guess you could say. And so one of the things that I am incredibly proud of in terms of both of our sets of parents, is that at the end of the day, their bottom lines to us were, we support you and we want you to be happy. Okay, we might not be over the moon that you're not doing things the way we want you to do it, because actually we ended up eloping and didn't do a traditional marriage at all. We kind of just were like, y'all are gonna fly in, right? We're gonna sign some dotted line in a few days. And so it was, in the end, they were very happy because they got what their with all of the investigation, what we realized their final line was, just don't let this other person go. And they didn't really care what it took for us to get there. At the end of the day, they were willing to give away a lot in terms of how traditional we went, whether we decided to do a traditional marriage or not. They were just very happy that we decided to say yes to each other for a lifelong journey. And that's when I understood that even though, especially for my parents, they claim that they're spiritual. So spirituality is very important to them, and more than necessarily than religion. And so I was raised in a background where going to the temple was customary. There was even dreams and expectations of me having a traditional Indian wedding. And maybe my mom and dad still expect that to a certain degree. One day they're like, we're going to get her to do it. But I don't know. But at the end of the day, they've always told me and reinforced the fact that your happiness is more important to us. And now they've even added another layer where they're like, regardless of what happens, they say that they want a relationship with Ansh and I no matter what. And they don't want that to disintegrate or deteriorate because of some sort of expectation either put on by society or by religion. And I really respect and value them for that. And it makes me more willing to have the conversation on, well, what would bring you joy? What would bring you happiness? And why is this thing so important for you if we are going to go down and actually have this conversation of a traditional wedding?
Yeah.
So when did you guys elope?
In the middle of our move to Seattle.
How long ago was that?
This was,
have we done a year?
More than a year. It's been a year.
Yeah, we did a year.
It was August of the 2021.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
August 14th, 2021.
Yeah. So we'd been in Boston for a few years. I'd been in Boston for more, almost 6. She'd been there for a couple of years. And I got a new job offer. And at this point, we were living in together. And I got this offer in Seattle. And I had to relocate for that. So we started packing. We started planning all the trip. We were going to do a road trip all the way across the country. And in that moment, we loved Boston as a city. And we were like, we want to make this more memorable. So let's pick this as a place. If we're ever going to do this, it will be in Boston. And let's, make us happy. We had discussed that we want to do it at some point, how and when we were still figuring out. So we're like, let's just do a local unofficial ceremony. We had his brother come over from New York. Her parents had come. My parents were in India. They were on Zoom. It was like just 6, 7, 8 people. That's it. In the park. And we signed the paperwork before itself. But it was just that moment which made it so special. And that was it. Honestly, like we just, I don't even know what else to say.
No, it was, I think the lead up time that our parents had was like 5 weeks from the kids went from, oh yeah, when we know we're going to get married, you'll know we're getting married, to, okay, so the date is August 14th. If you want to come, you can book some tickets, come in on August 14th. So it was a very quick turnaround time. And I think they were happy because they were getting what they wanted, which was for us to get married. But I think there was additional resistance on like, why don't you take your time? We can plan a whole ceremony and all of this. And then we had some more difficult conversations on, it's not necessarily the ceremony. We're not doing this necessarily for the ceremony. We understand that there are some things, some expectations that you would have from this marriage. But right now, this is really just for us. Like, this is us saying, I love you. And thank you, Boston, for bringing us together. And we want to create this one final memory before we leave.
How do you guys go from like resisting the labels, resisting marriage, right? Put the resistance, to your parents and the family pressure, to going, hey, let's elope.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think I want to give credits to my mom here when she said things will be better after, you do tie the knot or you do sign the paperwork or whatever. She was right. And what I will add to that is our love, because we're intentional with it grows every day. So that paper was, yes, that crossing that milestone made us love each other more. But I always tell Rashi, I love you more than a second before. So for us, it was just another excuse, another reason, anything, honestly, that I can grab from the universe to celebrate, to create a milestone. Now, it could be a birthday, it could be just we celebrate friend anniversaries. We have like 10 different anniversaries that we celebrate on days first that. It was just another thing.
Yeah.
We stopped fighting it and we're like, we don't have to resist this as a bad thing, and we can just embrace it in our own philosophy, in our own tradition of celebrating everything.
I'll add to that. I think for me, it was, I stopped resisting the label of marriage because I realized that the person who he is isn't going to change when this label comes my way. And that was the kind of security that I needed to be able to say, I'm willing to spend the rest of my life with you, and make the process of leaving much more complicated than if we just continue to date. It was almost like I needed the assurance that he wasn't going to change after marriage. Like, I wanted to know who he was in difficult moments, when we had to make life decisions, when things were good. I wanted to see all of these different sides of him to know exactly what am I getting into. And once the year and a half that we were living together, the pandemic accelerated everything. Like, we had moved in and 6 weeks later, the pandemic hit. So we went from being like, oh my God, we're trying out this live-in thing, to now I only live and see and breathe your existence in my life. And it was a lot. We accelerated our relationship curve like nothing. And after that experience, I knew that the person that I was with, whether I married him or not, was always going to be the partner that I needed to help fulfill all of my dreams. And that's what made it okay for me to say, yes, I do.
One of the things that we kind of define is that you need conditions in order to love unconditionally on earth. Right. So, you guys talk a lot about this intentionality and labels and stuff. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term, like, you think you're forging your own way and you look down and you're on the beaten path. Right? What was the resistance to some of that for you guys? And, is it stuff you saw in society, or, obviously roles have changed tremendously throughout different generations. What was that like for you guys? And how do you find, now that you're a year and a couple months in, what is different?
I think for me, the resistance to following this path really came from the fact that I don't like doing things because I should. I feel like you have to have a better reason than that's just the way it's been and you should do it. And I've even early on, before marriage was on the table, I used to tell my mom that, for me, understanding why I'm doing this is more important than just saying, yes, I will do it, because I will follow through. I will always follow through on what I give my word to. But if I'm not willing to give my word or commit to something, it's really because I don't understand its value and how it plays in my life yet. And so the field work that I had to do by living with Ansh and getting to know him and going through all of my litmus tests of how are we under stress, how are we when we're happy, like all of these questions that I had, they were my mind's way of understanding, okay, so when people say you're going to get married and you're going to have to support your partner and you're going to give them, unconditional love, like, okay, this is what it looks like for me. And a lot of that resistance I saw fading away as I started to live into the reality. And for me, the why became a lot clearer, and I was able to say, yes, you know what, marriage is fine. If marriage means that you get to show up every day, and even if your partner's not feeling okay and not having the greatest time and their emotions are rubbing you the wrong way, you know that they still love you and you're going to figure it out. If that's what it means, sign me up. I'm good for it.
That's a guarantee. That's a guarantee.
And but that's the living the reality part, like litmus testing the resistance, like stress testing that resistance that I needed to do for myself in order to feel happy and secure in this relationship. I think I have had friends who do this kind of testing after they sign the dotted line, right? Like then it's like they call it the natural growing pains of any relationship. I think I'm just, I decided to choose the pain first. I'm like, let me just see what it's all about.
Yeah. I want to echo that and be like that a lot of the resistance was just because things have happened and we didn't really understand why.
Mhm.
And I didn't take people's word for it.
Mhm.
Like things will be better or this is how it's done. It should be done. I didn't understand. And when somebody told me, this is for your best interest, it won't hurt you if you do so and so thing, I have always been like, let me do it. Let me experience it. Let me fail. I'm not afraid of failing. I embrace failing.
Mhm.
Let me make a mistake. And that's how I'll truly understand. And tomorrow, when I have to explain the same thing to my love, I can do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, that love can be my partner, my kid, whoever it might be. I can't really pass on your wisdom of this is how it should be done because I say so.
Mm.
If I don't really know what it feels like, that won't be effective.
Mhm. Yeah.
It sounds like you guys had to redefine what marriage means to you.
Absolutely.
And I think that is absolutely important for any couple getting into, wanting to create a committed partnership,
Mhm.
is that they have to define what it means to each of them, not by what their parents are telling them it should be or how things should be done.
Mhm.
I think at this point right now, what the time is, our son is probably getting engaged.
Oh, congrats.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And this podcast is going to come out down the line, so we're not giving out any secrets. So this is I can say this right now. So and that's something that they had to define for themselves as well.
Mhm.
In how they were going to show that to each other and show that commitment to each other. And it wasn't something that was going to be a surprise by one. It was something that the two of them were going to create together simultaneously. And maybe previous generations would have different thoughts about that.
Mhm.
For sure, previous generations would, but it's really up to each couple to define how their marriage starts, how their marriage continues to grow and evolve and change over the years.
Mhm.
And it sounds like that's what you guys have done, despite any labels that society puts on it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I want to add that the definition changes on
Mm.
a regular basis. We again are intentional about sitting and having a conversation about how these definitions are changing for us. But the part you mentioned about change, it's like that's the only constant. Things will change.
Mhm.
Your needs will change. Your partner's needs will change. You have to go back to the table together and have a respectful conversation of what does the future hold for you.
Mm.
It's interesting when I think about our son, and he's 24. And probably for the last 30 years, a baby that's born is born and on a camera almost all their life.
Wow.
And they are controlled in their play dates. There's always an adult. They're part of some extracurricular activity that includes a coach and an adult. And, when I was a kid, you went out and played. And if you fought with someone, you figured it out. And so we were figuring those things out very young.
Mhm.
But people today that are coming of age have been go to school and get good grades and do this and do this. And everyone around you is your competition. And you have to shine. You have to find a way, but conform. And so it's like, it seems to me that it's happening within relationships of, wait a second, we do this everywhere else in the world.
Mhm.
I don't want to do it in my home.
Yes.
Does that sound like a truth for you guys?
Yes, absolutely. Because if you have to pretend in your own home, then when are you ever going to really be able to do the work that's necessary to reflect on yourself and grow into the person that you want to be, rather than the person you think you have to be, because you're on display, or you're consistently having to perform to a certain standard. And so when the work that we do to build an intentional life and to create this relationship as is so that we are consistently empowered as individuals to keep seeking out our own growth and our relationships growth. It's this multi-layered aspect that always fuels back to us the drive to keep going forward and bring more happiness and joy into everything that we do.
That sounds really amazing, and I think that unfortunately a lot of couples your age don't do that. They don't create their relationship with intentionality because, as Jean mentioned, they have been conforming and they have been taught to just continue to do the things that they're expected of them. And so then they get into this relationship, they look at each other and they're like, this is not like Instagram or TikTok. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason to that is because they haven't been taught this. They don't learn this in school. They don't learn this in coaching classes. You learn this by experience. And some people learn it earlier than later. For me personally, it was this whole chapter of intentionality and why, and digging deep into layers and understanding your true emotions before you just try and put them on somebody else has been because I've spent time with Rashi. We've talked about these things again and again and again, and also because of podcasts like yours, where you come in, you listen, you understand what's going on and learn from people's stories. Other people don't put in that effort, and the more you put in the effort, the more you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, I remember early on, Ansh was just like, man, I didn't realize relationships were consistent work. And I'm just like, all right, this can either be a really big flag or the start of something new. And luckily for us, it ended up being a lifelong journey into growing together. And Ansh really took that, relationships are consistent work and turned it into something really beautiful. Now it's just an ethos of who we are and what we enjoy and do. But you're absolutely right. I feel like a lot of the times we shy away from intentionality, like Ansh said, because we haven't been taught that it's something that we have to invite and manifest in. And I think, even if we are trying to bring intentionality in, the primary component, especially in a relationship, is 3 parts. It's you and your own journey, your partner and their journey, and then what are you creating together? And it's either a fortunate mixture or an unfortunate mixture, depending on where you are, but you have to have all 3 of those parts kind of willing to operate in a similar nexus before you're able to actually create something very beautiful from it, right? Because one of the reasons my previous relationship before Ansh wasn't working was because I realized the role that I had to play in my own self-awareness and self-growth. And I was willing to play that role in the we of our relationship. But my partner at the time didn't necessarily think that there was much growing that he had left to do for himself. Or if he did see it, it wasn't in the same intensity that I would necessarily want, or the same passion that I think that an individual should feel about their own self-growth. And that's something that I realized very early on, is that if one of the 3 wheels is not here, I can't ride this as a motorcycle. It's a rickshaw. It's a tricycle. Like, I can't ride it as a motorcycle. So it's just too much. It would be too much work and too much of a burden for one person in that relationship to carry it forward. So I do think that as individuals, we have to be responsible for the individual part that we bring in a relationship.
2 whole individuals coming together to form something greater than themselves. You know what we call that?
Synergy.
I love it.
I love that.
We come here to teach what we come here to learn, and it's really great to see you guys doing the work and discovering it. We were like that early on in our relationship. Like, we knew we wanted to go into the psychology field, but we really knew we tried to stay away from couples work, and we just kept getting pulled back in, and here we are, 25 years later. So one last question, what is it that your partner does that they love you?
I think I would go back to it's the small things. There's this thing where I go to Rashi and I tell her I'm really proud of you, and she backs away from me. And she knows I'm saying that because I'm gonna take my cold hands and put it on her back and pat her back and be like, I'm very proud of you. But it's those small things. It's the small things of understanding each other, caring for each other. And even after that, she knows that I'm gonna put my cold hand. She lets me. She's like,
I choose the torture.
it makes me fall in love with her every day because of things like that.
Oh man, I don't know. One of these days it's just gonna be too cold, Ansh. But I think for me, echoing Ansh, it's definitely the small things, but it's also the big things. Like very, very early on, I noticed that Ansh likes to keep lists of things that I say. Like I'll say, oh, I really want to do this. Like one of the things on our list right now is I told him I've never slept overnight in a treehouse. And it's been on his list for, I think, 3 years now. And we had made a plan, and then COVID happened, so we weren't able to follow through, which is when he told me that we were actually going to be going to a treehouse. And I asked him, I'm like, but I talked about that like a year and a half ago. How do you still remember? And he's like, I wrote it down so that I could follow through on it. And that made me realize that he's listening. He's really listening, not only to the big things that like the I guess you could say like the currency of a relationship, like communication problems or me not feeling good about something. Those are important as well. But he's listening to the smaller things that bring me joy, and then he's finding ways to follow through on it. And that to me is the sign of someone who loves you and wants to show that they love you in every single way.
That's wonderful. Ansh and Rashi, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. This is really wonderful. Can you tell our listeners where they can access your podcast to listen to maybe the episode that we were on?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I first of all, I want to say thank you for having us. You have been an amazing inspiration for me, especially. I have like a few podcasts which I have notifications on for, and in relationships there are 2, ours and yours. So, right. And we love listening to the stories. But if you want to reach out to us, our blog is lovita.blog, lovita.blog, where we post frameworks and tools that we implement for our relationship, and also things that we've learned from experts and other couples. And the podcast is Love Vitamins for Relationships, because we believe in implementing these healthy practices to grow a healthier relationship every day.
And you'll find us on all of the platforms, I believe. Spotify, Apple, what was the other one? Instagram.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Definitely. We'll put those links in the show notes.
Vitamins for your relationship.
Love vitamins for your relationship.
Love vitamins, right?
That's
love vitamins.
Awesome.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
Well, thank you again for being on our podcast. We want to thank all of you for joining us today on Couple Synergy. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships. And this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners.
Sharing stories is a way that have been bringing human beings together since the beginning of time to bond and heal and grow. We hope that by you guys sharing your story, it's enriched your lives and the lives of our listeners.
For all of you listening, please let us know how you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the Home Study Course, the Couples Weekend Intensive, which is coming up in April of 2023. That's April 20th to the 23rd in beautiful Colorado. And our premier coaching program called Couple to Couple. Look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Kadkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.